in finding out the real story of poverty, of what's going on in our neighborhoods, of what's going on in the Northern Virginia area. I thought it was really interesting, John, that you talked about the high-cost place, the mid-cost place, and the low-cost place. And it is true that Northern Virginia, the cost of living around here is really astronomical, right? It's really tough. It's challenging. But the fact is that the economic challenges are so intense for many of our families that they are being forced further and further out of the city, having to travel bigger and bigger distances. It's harder and harder to get to work. And so what we at Network have said is the things that we need to work on include tax policy, stop trickle down. Let's stop trickle down. The second is we've got to work on living wages, not just minimum wage, but living wages so that folks can live in dignity. Pope Francis has this great idea that wages should be sufficient to allow each worker some time off with family, as well as the capacity to save for retirement. Isn't that a novel thought? Isn't that how we grew up? Isn't that what we think we're supposed to be about? And so one of the challenges is that those making policies have that experience, have that as the common social construct. But hey, it's not working at the bottom where you have to spend every cent to survive. It's somewhere between 37 and 40% of our population has savings right now. The vast majority have no savings. That's really worrisome. And it's not because they've got a profligate lifestyle. It's because every penny's going to survive. So at Network, in addition to this taxes, living wage, we're talking family-friendly workplace. Faith and our nation's supposed to be about supporting families, right? And yet, child care costs, paid sick leave, parental leave. I mean, it's the economic drivers that are making it all about the economy. And rather than having a family-friendly workplace, we have an economy-friendly workplace. And we've got to find a way to do both. So my good friend Steve, he just became a grandpa for the first time. He's so excited. And his daughters and husband are living in Alexandria, and they had twins, Claire and Jack. Claire and Jack are I saw pictures, adorable bundles. And then he says to me, "Do you want to get a chance to meet them?" I was like, of course I do. But what I realized was that their mom, Elizabeth, is having to have this horrible decision after 6 weeks. Does she go back to work right away? And then what happened to Claire and Jack? How does that work? Who are we as a nation? Don't we value our kids and our parents? And with twins, for heaven's sake. And the reason she gets 6 weeks is because she had a cesarean, so it's like, oh. So it's only about the surgery. It's not about having kids. There's something wrong if we say we're a nation built on family. Family-friendly workplace. And then we say that if we don't address some of the other issues around poverty, we're not going to get ahead. And one is democracy, access to democracy. And your Virginia election was a fabulous example of what happens when you get good turnout, right? And that rain that day, I was so terrified. I was absolutely terrified. Yeah, you felt my pain, I get it. But the thing that we know is that being able to have access to voting, voter rights, being able to vote without voter suppression and without gerrymandering, quite frankly, is a key issue. But there is one other stealth issue within democracy that we've come to realize, which is the 2020 census. The 2020 census, the census basically every 10 years, is one of the few programs mandated by the Constitution. I mean, that's why we do it. And what we know is if we don't count everybody, everybody doesn't count. And the census becomes not only how reapportionment takes place, it's also how much of the federal funding coming to states takes place. It's also how public health people figure out where they need to make sure there's health facilities. It's also, we were not lobbying with the Nielsen folks, you know, the Nielsen ratings. I had no idea they use census to be able to determine household sizes and how many people are watching what program and what percentages. It's also how corporations decide where they're going to build new plants or be engaged in a business, where they're going to build new stores. Everybody depends on the census. And right now, what's happening at the federal level is basically flat funding. It's seriously short of funding, just when we should be building up for the 2020 census. Additionally, on this one, they're trying to do more of it electronically, cost-effective, 21st century idea. What a great idea. Large parts of Virginia don't have access to broadband and will not have access to being counted that way. We've got to figure out how do we make this available so everyone gets counted. Challenge. After that, then after we've taken care of that, then we say, okay, the other thing is access to health care. You all know that in Virginia. Access, the expansion of Medicaid, so that low-income folks. But here's another story of 21st century poverty. We think Medicaid is principally, Medicaid expansion, ironically, is principally for the employed. It's for folks who are working but don't have benefits through their employers. And so this is not really about a handout to people in poverty, which is the narrative. Isn't that what you hear? Why are we giving government money? You know, handout. No, this is a business subsidy. Yep. And we need businesses speaking up for Medicaid expansion or giving their employees health care. Right. Because it's the working poor who don't have access to health care and their families. So what we're saying is if we want to mend these gaps, then healthcare and having a healthy society is at the heart of it. And the irony is, you know, I ride the metro a lot, and you really want healthy people on the metro, you know? Let's just be real. And public health issues, healthcare is not an individual piece. It's a communal requirement. So you all know that one probably better than I, and you've been haranguing down in Richmond to get it done. Maybe. Tide's turning. Let's see. So healthcare, citizenship, which for us is about immigration reform, because of the exploitation of our people, of immigrants. We have got legal immigrants and undocumented immigrants. Everybody's afraid these days. So we've got to turn that around and make sure that at least the DACA kids, the dreamers, get protection. That's the big thing now. But we have got to introduce the idea that we need a 21st century immigration policy generally. By the 2020 election, we've got to make it front and center. We've got to fix it. And we've got to fix it for the economy, but we have to fix it for our families. And that's the huge challenge. And finally, the last one I want to hit on that we work on at Network is housing. Because what we know that's happening in Northern Virginia, the gentrification that's going on. I actually live in D.C. in Southwest, and right outside my window is a new luxury condo building. I think it's about 8 stories, being built again. I mean, just what we needed, another luxury condo. But what's happening is there is no low and moderate income housing really being built. You all have a great, in Fairfax County, there's a great shelter for homeless folks, but there's no real plan for long-term housing. None. We have no plan as a nation. The best we've done is when Johnson was president. That's been a while. And we've got to fluff this up, because hardworking families cannot find access. And so these moms I was talking to yesterday, none of them live in their own apartment. They all, one mom told me there were 3 different households. It was a 2-bedroom apartment, and they had 3 different households living in the one apartment. And they take turns in the kitchen. There was a little living room, dining room kind of thing with one family, 1 bedroom with one family, one bedroom with another family, and they're using the kitchen. It's the only way they can afford it. But they're determined. And this mom told me that her oldest was in his first year of college, and she was so proud. He's working 35 hours a week and going to school full time. Who are we? Who are we as a nation? When I think my grandmother came from Germany, at the turn of the last century, and her struggle with her family. I mean, she was a young woman with a nurse's training, but she had to learn English, and then she worked really hard. I told my mom one time, I don't remember my grandmother having a German accent. And my mom said she worked very hard to get rid of it because of how people felt about Germans. World War I, World War II, unpleasantness, yes. And so what I've realized is for my grandmother, who we call May, to accommodate, or to become a person in the U.S., she's just like so many immigrants now, to belong, to be a part of us, to see hope where sometimes we get a bit depressed. So what do we do? How do we do this? It feels a little overwhelming. Did I overwhelm you? I'm afraid. Oh, yeah. Okay, cheer up. It could be worse. We could have not had Tuesday. So what do we do? How do we deal with this? Well, I think the first piece that we really need to work on, which is easier after Tuesday, is that we all need to be missionaries with a bit of joy. We need to know that in community, and this is why SALT's important, because you do it together, that joy is the magnetic communal attraction. Have you ever noticed those of us that care about this stuff often get a little grim, a little down, a little depressed, kind of sad, and then we say to each other, "Oh, come join us." Exactly. It doesn't work, does it? It's so urgent. But I'll tell you that having joy, which is a communal virtue, we can only have joy together. There is where we can draw others in. Because they're going to become really curious about what she's so happy about, or he's so happy about, when things are so miserable. And it's the community. I was talking on the phone with a woman who's creating a program at Villanova, and she wants to include a section on self-care. And I finally realized why self-care annoys me no end. There's all these sections in bookstores of self-care. I'm taking time out for me. It's just like you want to slug them or something, in a nonviolent but thoughtful way. The challenge is, what I realized is, we are not individualistic. We're not created to be loners. I cannot care for myself by myself. It's community where caring takes place. You can care for me. I can care for you effectively. But when I go off by myself to do we got to do our own practices, our own meditation, have time for ourselves. I agree with that. But I am not nourished, really, unless I'm engaged. And that creates the joy of connection.